What's up guys, Rejinx here. Today I'm going to be doing something a little different. Today we're going to be talking about the game Until You Fall and what it can teach us about the possible future in VR MMOs. Until You Fall is a rogue-lite dungeon crawler and it's completely single player. So what could we learn from that that'll teach us anything about VR MMOs? Well, the wonderful thing about VR is that it's completely brand new and that a lot of people have interesting ideas of things to try in VR, but some of them don't work like people intend. So by having these small single player games come out, which I'm not going to do a full review of Until You Fall, but it's a really great game and we'll talk about it as I play through it. In fact, so this won't be as scripted as my news videos are. I don't have a script written, so I may repeat myself a couple times. I'm gonna try to edit it to come out good, but let me know in the comments if you like this video. Let me know what the dislikes and likes. Dislike it if you don't like it, and I won't make any more of them. But I just thought that there's a lot of single player games and non-VR MMO games that have a lot of really cool stuff that could be combined to create really cool experiences, really cool VR MMO experiences. So, if you've never played Until You Fall, it's a dungeon crawler roguelite, like I said, and you have to select two weapons. You can select one weapon and then some kind of upgrade that gives you extra skills. In this area is where you spend points that you earn from runs to upgrade your weapons. And then once you actually start the game, the levels are procedurally generated. So this is the first level of the game. So the game is entirely melee. You can actually dash into people, and then there's going to be markings to show what direction you need to slash the enemies to do damage to them, and so you'll notice that the orange markings are where you have to slash the enemy. The blue markings are where the enemy is going to try to slash you. So you have to block the blue markings. That was the first level, so it went pretty quick. Every time you complete a level, there's going to be 3 different runes you can pick from. I really like this. You pick it up, you can read what each one does. You only get to choose one. And once you decide what you want, you just take it, you grab it, and you just break it in your hand, and it empowers your weapons. I think it's a really cool way to choose. I think it could be used so this mechanic would be really cool to use in dungeons in MMOs. You could walk up to different shrines, let's say there's 3 or 4 shrines and you have to pick, and each one will give you a different buff. So there might be a buff that would really work well for a tank, or a buff that will really work well for a healer or a certain type of DPS, and they could just walk up and grab the one they want and just smash it, and then they would get that buff for the entire rest of the dungeon. And I think it'd be a cool way to add new mechanics to a game without breaking a game. So like in VR MMOs, you really have to worry about power creep. You don't want to give continually more and more mechanics to each class because it'll be hard to balance them. But in a single dungeon, you can give new mechanics to classes or power-ups to make them feel really strong in that dungeon, and then at the end of the dungeon take it away from them. And I think that's a really good way to make a game feel fresh, and this kind of reminds me of that. So there is also in this game a power-up system. You'll notice my axe is glowing here, and that means that my alt is up basically, and which we've already seen that in most VR MMOs. There's going to be a power-up system where you'll alt, but it feels really good in this game. I think I'm going to use it right here against this boss, and you'll notice how quickly he goes down, and it just feels so strong. Yeah, bosses have complex attack patterns that repeat. So, which I say bosses, this is actually just a regular guy. He's just a level above the lower minions. So anytime you play a new VR game, at least for me, if it has a really good mechanic, it makes me think, man, wouldn't this be good if it also included in this type of game, right? and Until You Fall's melee mechanics just feel really good. Now, the way they telegraph attacks is a little intrusive, like these giant blue markings across your screen. I think they definitely can. So, if you were creating a melee system that used this kind of blocking and attacking mechanic, I think you would definitely use this kind of very obvious markings early in the game, but you could make it much less obvious, maybe much smaller, or make it even where if you're fighting the same enemy, for the 10th or 100th time, that the markings just aren't even turned on. So you just have to be able to watch the enemy and tell where he's about to attack and block in that way. But I do think this melee system for a game is better than anything I've seen in any type of VR MMO yet, where it's highly telegraphed and your attacks are highly, like, you can tell where you're supposed to attack, but it's fast paced and the enemy reacts to you as you attack it. And this made me think that so when I first started playing VR, I actually thought ranged only VR MMOs would actually be better, because without any type of haptic feedback, like really direct feedback, I felt like melee wouldn't be any fun. But after playing this game, I really feel like a melee only VR MMO would actually be really neat too. Obviously, you don't want to break up your community this early in VR since the player base is so small. But if you would do a Sword Art Online melee only MMO, where the difference is, instead of fighting these giant monsters where you have 20 people fighting a single monster, that might be a little weird in melee, but you could have a 10-man raid where you're just swarmed with like guys like this guy, right? But when you get swarmed by a bunch of enemies, and each person in your party has a different type of melee, but they're all fighting in the same type of system, it makes it where you can make really interesting fights, because if you add in ranged attacks, suddenly there's certain mechanics that can be completely avoided, because you can just shoot, bad guys from range or whatever. But if you have a game that's fully melee, everybody's using a sword or a staff or some other type of melee weapon, it makes it where it's a lot easier to balance fights and make a very focused fight system, right? Which obviously right now everybody's trying to make the widest MMOs they can. If you look at all the projects that I talk about in my news videos, everybody's trying to make, I hate to say it, they're trying to make their games be everything for everybody. And of course you have a risk of being nothing for nobody by doing that. I'm not saying any game's going to end up doing that, but in the games that are out already, such as A Township Tale or Orbis, you can see that certain systems, because they're trying to add in so many systems, a lot of the systems are lackluster. But if you can focus on a more narrow number of systems, so even if you would take a game like Until You Fall, and so make it almost, I don't know if any of y'all have played the original Guild Wars, but make it where there's a hub level where you can see 30 or 40 people, right? Everybody's hanging out, there's a player house, there's stores, there might be crafting. But once you enter a dungeon, so like from the hub world, you enter areas that are all, like every time you leave town, you enter an instance town, which there could be multiple towns, but all your combat areas are instanced, and you can only enter with your party. And it could be like this, it could be procedural, or it could be laid out dungeons. But either way, you're leaving with 4 to, you could even have it as low as 4 people fight. And that could still be a VR MMO, right? So it's basically a dungeon crawler, similar to this, but you can have, obviously, if you're making a VR MMO, you're going to need a lot more content, a lot more enemies, and more story-driven levels. And a hub world where people can interact. But I still think that would be amazing. Having a few guys, you get together, you run dungeons together. At low levels, you could run with random people, and as you level up and the content gets harder, you have to get in more and more set groups. And just because it's melee doesn't mean you can't have the full trinity taken care of, right? You could still have a healing paladin, You could still have a tank that is there to really grab aggro from multiple guys, and all he's going to be doing is blocking shots. He's not going to be doing attacks, while you have melee guys with in the back like blasting into people. I just really think that you could do some interesting things with a melee only game. So this is the first boss fight. This is so far I've actually never beaten the game, but this is, I believe, the main antagonist of the game. Big nasty guy, and the fight's pretty fun. I have it on easy right now. I've played him on harder levels, but his attacks come fast and furious. And again, still, it uses the highly telegraphed lines that you have to dodge. And I used my ult, so I was able to knock him down pretty fast, and now he's gonna spawn a bunch of minions. But the boss fights are really good, and the boss fights aren't procedural. So I definitely think that, like, so a fight like this, where you have to fight one main guy and then he spawns a bunch of little guys, this would be a great fight to do, you know, in a group with obviously harder enemies. But even by yourself, it's a fun time. And even though this game doesn't have loot drops and stuff, like, I can definitely see all these mechanics working great in a VR MMO. Obviously, the graphics are much better than a lot of games right now, and they're able to do that because it's single player. But like I said, this is my whole point in this series, is to show what could be in the future. I just really think that this mechanic would work really well in a multiplayer, you know, group-based combat. Alright, and that was it. That was the whole fight. Again, it's on easy, and I got this guy leveled up. These fights were much harder in the beginning. I also find movement in this game works really well. So movement in this game uses both sliding and dashing, and you could play the game with just dashing. So the dash mechanic, I think, would actually work really well in a class-based game as well, because you can save up dashes, right? So let's say I need to attack one guy or pull somebody, I can dash forward, attack, or even dash forward twice, or dash forward to pull one, then dash behind something, and use that to control the fight. Well, you could make it where certain classes have many more dashes than others, or even like a main tank class wouldn't have any dash, or they could only go in and can't retreat, right? And I think the mechanic would really lend itself well to trying to set up different metas and different class specs. So, and the cool thing with this type of combat, because the combat would be similar for every class, you could actually make it be much easier to make an open class system than a game where you're trying to balance magic and melee and archery and tell people it's an open class system where they can get, you know, levels in all the different things and use them all at the same time. If you had a pure melee system, you could make it where you don't have to pick, hey, I'm a paladin, hey, I'm a tank. You could have different trees, like talent trees, where one of them is a tanky line, one of them is a paladin line, and where people can pick from both of them and stuff like that, and kind of build your own class, right? Obviously, a meta will grow out of it, and the last thing you would want is to make it where you set up fights where a single build is the best build, and you end up with fights with 5 guys go into a dungeon and they all use the exact same build because it's a super reliable, like it has healing on itself and all that. You want to make it where you need multiple builds to get through fights. So obviously you'd have to add mechanics on top of what's available in this game. Okay, so this level is interesting. This level has ranged attacks, and you'll notice, okay, yeah, you see that coming at me? Whenever they shoot at you, you actually have to slash in a certain direction to hit it. I get these guys down pretty quick, because anytime you're in a fight, you're going to want to take down the ranged guys first. But, and that's another interesting feature that you could add to a VR MMO that's melee only, is you can make it where the enemies have ranged attacks, but no player does. So it actually gives an advantage to the enemies and makes developing interesting fights. So you could make it where you have to melee block certain ranged attacks coming at you and you don't have any good way to deal with hitting them back. Restricting a player and making it where they only have a certain set of tools, like it's not this infinite set of tools, makes it where it's going to be a lot harder for them to find exploits and really easy ways to cheese things, right? Anyway, that's about all I wanted to show you with Until You Falls today. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments if you like this video. It's my first time trying this. I didn't have any kind of script. I was just kind of spitballing and talking about what I think about this game. If you do like this video, I do have an idea to make it a series. I have other games in mind that I've played and I'm like, man, that would be really cool. So yeah, I really hope you like it. And until next time, I'll see you in the metaverse.
Annihilated.